Recently, and by recently I mean like 8 months ago, I had never had an experience before this. I moved to an island in the South Pacific, and I've gotten the hiking bug, so I try to get out to new locations as much as I possibly can, what with work eating into my precious time. This happened about 2 weeks ago. Since I live in the South Pacific region, it gets mighty hot, driving by all the most insane hikers indoors, unless it's at night. Of course, I'm not a masochist, so I try to do all my hiking in the early hours of the morning, or in the evening when it starts getting cool. I've never been afraid of going hiking by myself. I did it when I lived in Oregon, and never ran into any problems with it. But my island isn't my friendly home state. I always carry pepper spray, and when I used to go hiking in Montana and Wyoming, would sometimes carry a handgun to ward off anything I couldn't take on, whether it was a bear or person, but I had always gotten off considerably lucky. I got to the trailhead at about 6:30 in the evening. The trail was called 1,000 Steps, but in all honesty, it was mostly just a walk straight down to the cliff, and then a grueling journey back up. I didn't want to go, but my dog, Mad Moxie, needed to be walked, and I had done the hike so many times I could probably do it in my sleep. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up was an old, rickety, rusted-out blue pickup truck with a big plastic tarp over the bed to keep out the rain. These are pretty common on the island, affectionately earning the name Guam Bombs. I didn't think much of it as I hooked up Moxie and started heading down the trail, trying my best to ignore the mosquitoes that were making a meal out of my exposed neck. Heading down the trail was relatively easy, avoiding the banana spiderwebs. I felt the stress of my day slowly unwind as the underbrush grew darker and night approached. I made it all the way down to the water's edge when I noticed a man standing about 100 yards away. It was dark enough now that I could only see his silhouette, so I have no idea if he was looking at me or at the water, but I chose to ignore him and instead pull Moxie's ball from my backpack and throw it for her a few times to get all her wiggles out. After some time, the man started walking over to me and stopped maybe about 10 feet away. Now, I'm not a tiny waif of a woman. I'm 23 years old and I stand at about 5'6", and this guy was just a couple inches taller than me. But most of the locals were on the smaller side. But something about him just felt weird. "Evening." "Evening," I greeted as he nodded and looked down at Moxie, who had just returned from running after her ball. I stooped down to pet her now sweaty head as the man kept his eyes strained on my dog. "Can I help you, sir?" "Pretty dog," he responded mildly. "You alone?" "I have my dog," I said lamely, trying to sound braver than I was feeling. "I'm never alone." I tried to emphasize on the fact that I had my dog with me, but the man seemed unfazed by my statement. "Oh, have a good night." With that, he turned around and started walking back towards the trailhead. I watched his shadow disappear into the trees and waited for about half an hour before I too started walking back towards the path, my mind on high alert as Moxie pulled me through the trees and up the cliffside. The crickets pierced the night as I climbed the steps, illuminated by my flashlight. My hands were full with Moxie's leash and my light, but you could bet your buns that I would have pepper spray out if I had an extra hand. Finally, my lights pierced the trees at the top, and I practically booked it up the hill. When I got to the top, I nearly shat myself. The rusted blue pickup truck was sitting in the parking lot still, but their passenger side door was practically touching my car's driver's side. Inside the car, I could faintly see two men sitting in the cab, and I could feel them watching me. Slowly, I approached my car, walking as far over to the passenger side as I could, and kept Moxie with me as close, as I opened the door and crawled over to the driver's side. At that moment, the door of the pickup truck flew open and my dog started going apeshit, barking at the two people who were now outside of their car and trying to break into mine. Hard in my chest, I rammed the keys into the ignition and tore out of the parking lot so quickly I nearly took my mirror off. I called my mom as soon as I got home and she begged me to call the police. Unfortunately, the police here on the island aren't as vigilant as they are in the mainland, and that area is known for car thefts, mugging, and other debaucheries, as I learned from my coworkers later that week. Earlier this month, another girl actually disappeared from the area without a trace, and it makes me wonder if the men in the blue pickup truck didn't have something to do with it. If I hadn't had Maxie with me, would I have been mugged? Or worse? If I learned anything from this experience, it's that for my lady hikers, please always take pepper spray with you, go hiking in groups, and always let someone know where you're going. It might save your life someday. And to the men in the pickup truck, let's never meet again. Hey guys, after reading tons of stories here, I remembered one of my own. This might not be as intense as some of the other stories here, but I thought I would share regardless. This happened a year ago when I was working as a pizza deliverer. I often worked late at night, and despite other women being sexually harassed on the job every now and then, I never felt very nervous when delivering. Anyways, this happened at around 11 p.m. I was delivering to a house, and as I arrive, I park out the front. Now, there are two things you should know from here. 1. The pizza is on the passenger side, and 2. This is an Australian derelict suburb. So, I get out of the car and immediately notice this 20-something-year-old guy standing on the opposite side of the road facing me. This being a derelict area, and with me being rushed, I thought nothing of it as it's not too uncommon to see derelicts hanging around the streets. But as I started walking around the car to the passenger side, I found him behind me. He asked me what the time was, and I said it was about 11-ish. This still didn't have me on edge, as I was used to this kind of stuff. But as I was opening the door to get the pizza, a jolt of suspicion came over me as I noticed he was still behind me, not saying anything. Looking back at it now, I find it unnerving at how subtle the feeling was, and how close I was to ignoring it. But I'm glad I didn't. I, while trying to act nonchalant, quickly closed the passenger door, walked around to the driver's side, hopped in, locked the door, and turned on the car to put it in drive. I felt like I was being overly cautious, but sure enough, he pops around to my side of the car. At this point, I feel pretty safe, and dare I say, proud in my decision-making, so I cracked the window to get to the bottom of this. "Do you have the time on you?" Second time he's asked this. "It's 11 o'clock. Awkward pause. "Can you please give me a lift? I need to go to my friend's house and it's where you're delivering." "What?" "No." "Well, I know whose pizza that is. It's my friend's down the road. I'll show you where it is if you can give me a ride there." The conversation went on, but you get the idea. This guy was persistent. I eventually told him to get out of here, and I was calling the police. I closed the window and started dialing. As I was speaking to the police, he started yelling and banging on the window really hard. Thankfully, he eventually left, and the police came and searched for him while I delivered the pizza. Stuff like that happened every now and then, but despite most of it being just immature sexual harassment, I thankfully learned to be alert whilst on the job. I don't know what he wanted, but I'm glad I didn't find out. Picture it. Hometown, 2003. I was 25, a year out of college, working my first grown-up job, and had been living alone in my apartment for about 6 months when I arrived home to find my phone ringing. I missed the call, checked the caller ID, and didn't recognize the number. The area code was from my old college town, about an hour away. I went about my business, but within a couple of minutes, the same number called again. "Hey girl, how are you? It's been such a long time." "Hi? Who is this?" "Girl, it's Mandy. What are you up to?" I know 4 Mandys. None lived college town. None called me girl all the time. None sounded like a valley girl on uppers. Mandy who? "Oh my gosh, we have so much to catch up on. So you moved back into hometown? That's great. Where are you working? Are you still dating that guy from high school? I so thought y'all would end up together. How are your parents? Where do you live in hometown? What are you up to tonight? Wait, this was a fifth Mandy. Mandy Jones from high school? I mean, we'd been friends when we took dance in elementary school, but we'd long since lost touch. Why in the world would she be calling me now? This didn't feel right. Hey! Yeah, so I'm working at local business in hometown. What are you up to? Oh, that's great! I always knew you'd really be somebody. So where do you live now? And are you still dating that guy from school? That really cute one? Weird. I had one boyfriend in high school. He attended a different school and we broke up after a couple of months. Hardly a love story for the ages. So, this is Mandy who again? Girl, Mandy, come on now. So... And she continues blathering on, asking all kinds of personal questions, which I kept dodging. She kept wanting to know where I lived. Answering hometown wasn't enough. And what about that cute guy from school? And what about the cute guy from school? Okay, look. I don't know who you are and I have no idea how you got this number. Mandy Roper. Girl, I know it's been a while, but you should know that we played volleyball together. You wrote this number on my yearbook, and I just came across it and I thought we should catch up. All the red flags. A few things you should know about Mandy Roper. 1. She sounds less like a chirpy valley girl and more like someone who started smoking a pack a day at age 4. 2. While we did play volleyball, and softball and all the other balls, together, I guaranteed that if you asked her, Mandy would tell you that we played basketball together. Mostly because 3. Basketball is the reason Mandy Roper hated my guts. I was one of a handful of freshmen on the varsity team, and within 2 weeks of joining the team, had made an enemy of the scariest bitch on the team. It's a very long, very silly teenage girl drama that isn't relevant to the rest of this tale. Just keep in mind that Manny would rather have told me to go fuck myself with a rusty spork than have tea in a chat. Anyway. 4. I'd gotten that phone number when I moved into my apartment 6 months prior, so I couldn't have given it to her in high school. Also, I would have faked my own death before purposely giving that crazy lady my number. So I told Mandy Roper as much. You don't sound like Mandy Roper. I couldn't have given you this number in high school because I've only had it for a couple of months. And Mandy Roper hates me. She is the last person who would ever give a crap about what I'm doing right now. Who is this really? Seriously, who are you? Fuck you. Click. Over the next week, maybe 2, I had several hang-ups at my office, and the rose was left on my doorstep that my then-boyfriend denied having left. I was literally clueless about stalking and harassment and whatnot, so I wasn't really sure what to do. After it seemed the hang-ups were going to stop, I called a friend who still lived in College Town and asked her cop husband what to do. He took the number and looked it up for me, then called the house. The most he could figure out is that it was a little old lady who lived alone, and seemed thoroughly confused by the whole story, and swore no one else could have used her phone. My dear friend Mandy must have been someone close to the little old lady though, because all of it stopped after he made that call. It wasn't until years later that I realized why someone chose to pretend to be Mandy Roper. We played volleyball together one single year, and it just so happens that we were seated next to one another in the team photo in the yearbook. We were both smiling in that pic. We'd simply gotten used to ignoring each other by then. So, someone somewhere got their hands on an 8-year-old yearbook from someone I went to school with, looked me up, picked the person sitting beside me in a team photo, then called and harassed me for a couple of weeks. I sit here, 14 years later, still unclear on the who, what, when, where, why, and how. But Mandy Roper? Let's not meet. P.S. I figure there will be questions, so here are my answers. I have no reason to think Cute Boy from high school was actually involved. Seriously, we'd broken up nearly 7 years prior and had no contact after we graduated. I initially thought it was College X's ex Becky, who he had dated before me and had always disliked me. She still lived in College Town, but I could never tie her to little old lady and the phone number in question. Also, College X swore Becky was way too timid to try something like that. She'd be more likely to cry and write volumes of poetry while listening to Jewel. I eventually, belated of course, realized it had to be a direct result of dating then-boyfriend Joe Dirtbag, because I'm fairly certain he had a girl in every port, so to speak, and most of them were as crazy as a cat in heat. Mandy Roper faded into the ether. I do see real Mandy Roper though. We avoid one another in the grocery store. She still looks like she wants to hunt me down and stuff me in a locker.